Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Jessica Devereaux in Washington. President Obama met with NATO leaders in Warsaw last weekend to what seemed like a restatement of vows to protect Europe. Let's take a listen to what the president had to say.
In this challenging moment, I want to take this opportunity to state clearly what will never change, and that is the unwavering commitment of the United States to the security and defense of Europe, to our transatlantic relationship, to our commitment to our common defense. Throughout my time in office, one of my top foreign policy priorities has been to strengthen our alliances, especially with NATO. And as I reflect on the past 8 years, both the progress and the challenges, I can say with confidence that we've delivered on that promise. The United States has increased our presence here in Europe. NATO is as strong, as nimble, and as ready as ever.
So ready that the president will be sending 1,000 troops to Poland as one of 4 battalions that are being sent to countries bordering Russia. But what is really at the heart of this matter? Are these just tactics by the U.S. leading to an escalation of tensions between the U.S. and Russia? And what role should NATO be playing in maintaining a balanced Europe? Now joining us to help us answer these questions is our guest, Michael Hudson. Michael is a distinguished research professor of economics at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. He's also the author of many books, including his latest, Killing the Host: How Financial Parasites and Debt Destroyed the Global Economy. Thank you so much for joining us, Michael.
It's good to be here.
So, Michael, we just heard President Obama pledging his allegiance to protecting Europe. Does Europe really need protecting, though?
Well, as soon as Obama made those words, there was a fury of European statements saying that Obama and the NATO was making Europe less secure. The French Prime Minister, Francois Hollande, said that we don't need NATO. NATO has no role to play in Russian relations. That leaders of the 2 major German parties, both the Social Democrats and the Christian Democrats, said that NATO was warmongering. Gorbachev came out and said the world has never been closer to nuclear war than it is at present. William Perry, the former head of the Pentagon in the mid-90s, said that NATO is threatening and trying to provoke atomic war in Europe. And one of Russia's leading military strategists said, here's what the problem is. NATO wants to move bombers and atomic weapons right up to the border of Russia. That means that if they launch over us, we have only a few seconds to retaliate. President Putin, a little while ago, had given a speech saying Russia doesn't really have a land army. In fact, today, no country in the world, in the Northern Hemisphere at least, has a land army that can invade anywhere. Try to imagine America being invaded by Canada or by Mexico on its borders. You can't imagine it. Impossible. No democracy can afford a land army anymore because the costs are so high that the cost of mounting a land war will just impoverish the economy. As a matter of fact, what NATO is trying to do is to goad Russia into building up an army so that it can undercut its economy by diverting more and more resources away from the economy towards the military. Russia's not falling for it. Putin said that Russia has no intention of mounting a land army. It is unthinkable that it could even want to invade the Baltics or Poland. What Putin did say, we have one means of retaliation, and that's atomic bombs. Atomic weapons are basically defensive. They're saying, we don't need an army anymore. Nor does any country need an army if they have an atomic weapon, because if you attack us, we'll wipe you out, and we'll be wiped out too, but you're never going to be able to conquer us, and no country really can conquer any other country. Russia can't conquer Europe, so that the effect, Putin and the Russian leaders have said, look, suppose that an American plane goes a little bit off, like it's always, the ships try to provoke things. We don't know whether it's an atomic attack at all. We can't take a risk. If there's a little bit of a movement on against us, we're going to launch the hydrogen bombs, and there goes Berlin, Frankfurt, London, Manchester, Brussels. He said, and that's why you're having all of these warnings, and Europe is absolutely terrified that Obama is going to destabilize, and even more terrified of Hillary getting in, who's indicated she's going to appoint a super hawk, the Cheney protege, Flournoy, as Secretary of Defense, and appoint Victoria Nuland, as Secretary of State, and all throughout Europe. I've been in Russia and Germany twice in the last 2 months, and they're really worried that somehow America is telling Europe, "Let's you and Russia fight." And basically, it's it's a crisis.
Okay, Michael, I want to get back to your point about how we're seeing this narrative develop about a potential nuclear war on the horizon. And it seems like it's quite real. This is not just, conjecture here. We have US and Russian military forces warning that a nuclear war is nearer than ever before. So let's talk about interest here. On either side, let's be as specific as possible and call a spade a spade. In whose interest is it really to keep up this narrative? Because I'm sure there are people not just in the United States that profit from this, but also in Russia. Can you speak to that?
Well, one of the points made at the NATO meetings was NATO urged countries not to rely on Russian weaponry. There was an insistence by Obama that the NATO countries spend 2% of their GDP on NATO, on arms, mainly by buying arms from American military manufacturers, Raytheon, Boeing, and the others. Now, look at what's happening in Europe. It's not even growing 2% because of the austerity that's being imposed on it. So 2% is the entire annual economic growth in Europe. This large an amount has to be spent on American arms. So it turns out that this saber rattling to Russia merely is a means of obliging the European countries to pay the United States arms manufacturers for goods and to basically hold Europe up for ransom, saying if you don't be a part of this, we're not going to defend you. And Europe is saying, well, we really don't need defense. We'd rather have an economic relationship with Russia, especially the Germans say, we don't want the sanctions. The Italians say, we don't want the sanctions. We want to make money off Russia. And America says, we don't want you to make money off Russia. Buy from us, not from Russia. Buy your agricultural goods and your other goods from us and from countries in the dollar orbit, not from the Russian orbit. And that essentially was what Obama meant by the reset. It meant a new Cold War, but the essence of the Cold War is to fight in the new way, which is a financial war, with military only being a kind of catalyst for the financial warfare between the United States on the one hand, and it's now the first effect of the reset was to drive Russia into an alliance with China. And now the NATO may be overplaying its right-wing hand so much that it's driving Germany and Italy and France out of NATO. That the effect is
Michael,
what it's doing is counter-effective.
Michael, what about on the Russian side? Are there interests that are encouraging this reset?
They had hoped that the reset would mean a winding down of military. Russia would like to use, every country would like to use more of its resources for the domestic economy, not for the military overhead. And in a way, America is trying to force Russia to spend more on overhead as part of its economic warfare with Russia. This was Brzezinski's plan with Afghanistan, way under the Carter administration. If you could force Russia to pay more for its military to defend Afghanistan, then its economy would buckle and you'll have discontent there. And then the Americans can come in and promote nationalist and other localist breakups and try to break up Russia, just as America is trying to push a breakup of China as a long-term strategy. And there's no way that this cannot backfire on the United States.
Okay, let's talk about what everyday people could do to move away from accepting this narrative, or move away from this potential reset that President Obama is proposing. What policy decisions could be made to de-escalate this tension?
to essentially to dissolve NATO, which is what France has been pushing for many years. There's no need for NATO now that there's no threat of any military invasion anymore. Remember, after World War II, NATO was put up when there was a thought that, well, the first idea is European countries should never go to war with each other again. There will never be war between France, Germany, Italy. That's been solved. There's no way in which European countries will go to war. The second thing was, well, what if Russia would reinvade like it did when it fought against Hitler? Well, there's no danger of Russia invading anymore. In fact, in 1990, when the Soviet Union broke up, the Ukraine passed a resolution that it wanted to remain neutral and benefit from its sort of neutral pivot between Russia and Europe. And the United States put $5 billion into Ukraine and spurred a lot of nationalist revolution. And so it took the United States 20 years to turn that around and to somehow break up this neutrality. So the U.S. strategy is to prevent neutrality. Europe's economic interest is to achieve neutrality with Russia and have economic unity so that there's as little chance of any confrontation with Russia in Europe as there is among the European countries themselves.
All right, Michael Hudson, always a pleasure having you on the program. Thank you so much for being with us.
Good to be here.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.